Hello, I'm Valerie Biden Owens, chair of the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware. Today, I have the privilege of introducing Congressman Jake Auchincloss. Jake has represented Massachusetts' 4th Congressional District since 2021. Thank you, Congressman, for joining us today in this episode of All Politics is Personal. It's a program where we introduce the public to the person behind the politician. We know anyone can research your policies and accomplishments, but that's not what we're here. That's not what we want to talk about today. We're here to talk about you. So tell us, what was it like growing up?
First of all, thank you for having me on. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I grew up outside of Boston in Newton, Massachusetts, and grew up in a family of medical professionals. My father is a surgeon. My mother is a scientist, grandfathers on both sides, aunts, uncles, cousins, all in the medical field. And that really shaped me growing up because curiosity and an almost obsession with facts and data really shaped how we viewed both the personal and the political.
Well, for a point of personal privilege, as you say in Congress, we do have one thing in common. I was born in Boston and we lived in Newton. What we don't have in common is the appreciation and understanding of data as with the scientific mind. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I have an older brother and an older sister. My sister is 8.5 years older than me, and she was almost a second mom growing up, very protective of me, and we're still very close. She actually lives in Washington, D.C. now with her kids, and so I get to see her occasionally, and that's always nice when I'm away from home. And then my brother, 6 years older than me, who has followed in the family's footsteps, he's a surgeon. And I, like a lot of younger brothers, just followed him and his friends around to the point, I'm sure, of being a huge annoyance. And they were like a pack of older brothers to me, role models, everything from sports to playing Sonic the Hedgehog and Legend of Zelda to Risk.
Yeah.
And they would pummel me from time to time, and they would also offer advice. And that was a really nice way to grow up. It's just I had not only two great parents, but also sort of a second mom and my sister, and a bunch of older brothers.
So it's with your brother 6.5 years older. So
6 years exactly. We had the same birthday.
Which is what?
January 29th.
That's pretty cool.
My mom, I'm a C-section, and my mom gave my brother, who was 6 at the time, the option of, do you want Jake to be born on your birthday? Or I can schedule the C-section for a couple days after or before, and you can have different birthdays. And my brother chose to have me born on his birthday.
What a good brother. What a good brother.
He very much enjoyed having me come home, and then asked that we return me a week into it.
Oh, that's funny. So what grade does that put it? Were you basically then an only child in grade school?
The psychologist would say that if you're 6 years younger than your older siblings, that you have a lot of only child behaviors. I don't know if that's true, but yes, I was alone in the house for almost half of my school age time.
Did you like school?
I loved school. I was a nerd. I loved all
That's
of it.
what I was going to ask you. Sports, nerd, scholar.
I did sports as well, but
And nerd's kind of a weird word. I mean, what do you mean by nerd?
That I really enjoyed both the classroom instruction as well as the homework, reading, math, science.
Should be then a whole lot more nerds in our world. Look where they brought you to this place right now. So
except for Latin, where I got a D. That was definitely my worst subject.
I had to take 4 years of Latin. I went to Ursuline Academy for young girls. It didn't do much for me.
You haven't found it usul with other languages?
No. I know we're supposed to, but
I feel better.
I never did. When did you go to? All right, so you've got a science background. Your parents. And medical. Did you pursue that when you went to school? You went to Harvard, I know that.
I went to Harvard undergrad. I kind of knew early on that I was not going to walk down the path of medicine or science. I still have a profound respect for those professions, and it's a very important area for my district and obviously for my family. But I just sort of knew it was not going to be what I was going to do. I was always more interested in history and policy, and I also always knew, I shouldn't say always, starting probably middle school, high school, that I was going to go into the military.
Okay, now why?
I think it's like most things, multi-threaded. We don't have a very strong family background in military service, but my grandfather on my mom's side joined the Marine Corps in 1942. Now, I come from a mixed marriage. My dad was Boston Brahmin, Episcopalian, very much his family established in Massachusetts. My mom was the granddaughter of Jews fleeing the pogroms in Ukraine. And so her father, my grandfather, grew up in the suburbs of Boston, quite poor, and really pretty marginalized as a young Jewish man at that time. And he tried to join the Marine Corps in 1942. 1942, this is a time when Jews, of course, are being exterminated in Europe, when the Marine Corps is losing the war in the South Pacific. And the first time he tries to enter the recruiting station, his mother drags him out by his ear.
How old was he?
He was 17.
Well, no wonder.
She was not having it. And she was a tough lady. I never got to meet her, but she was she was a political boss in Chelsea in the 1930s, which was a hard thing for a woman to do at that point. The second time he got away with it, but the Marine Corps gave him an academic test as part of their processing, and they realized that he was quite smart. And instead of sending him to the South Pacific, they sent him to Purdue to study biomedical engineering.
Oh, gosh.
Which is just an incredible thing to consider, that at a time when Jews were being persecuted the world over, the U.S. government invested in a poor Jewish kid with limited prospects in Massachusetts at our lowest moment in World War II. And he took that opportunity and seized it, became a pioneering doctor and also a scientist in artificial limbs, framed the first Jewish chair of orthopedic surgery at Mass General, created the Boston arm, which was a prosthetic that at that time was really very innovative. And that story always stuck with me.
Now, did you know him? Was he still alive when
I knew him well. And I actually got to know both my grandparents, both sets of my grandparents extremely well growing up. It's one of the things I feel most fortunate to have experienced, is having both sets of grandparents come over almost weekly growing up and getting to hear from them. And I'm really trying to recreate that for my children. Did
you have any sayings or anything that your grandparents or your parents taught you, that they said over and over, your word is your bond, or whatever it is, from the two different perspectives, one of shorthand, one of wealth, and one of being marginalized?
The immigrant success story.
Yes.
Yeah.
What'd you pick out from both of them?
I think, so two things. One is the absolute importance of academics and succeeding in school, and that education was a privilege, not an obligation. I remember when I was graduating from high school, and my dad's mom, we invited her to the graduation, and she came, and she said to me, "I find it ridiculous that grandparents are bringing their grandchildren presents. You should not be getting a present for graduating. This is a privilege that you get to go to school, and it's expected that you succeed in this school and that you go on to succeed in higher education. That is just a given." And I've always taken that with me to heart, that you don't get a trophy for getting to go to school. This is something that we should be proud of as Americans, and that everyone should really strive to succeed in. And then the second thing was just integrity. And it wasn't so much a saying as just every opportunity that my parents had to reinforce how important integrity was, whether it was my mom talking about data collection in her scientific lab and how important it was to make sure every single decimal point was right, or my dad telling me that, if you make a mistake, it's okay, but you need to be honest about it. Mm-hmm. That was really just always enforced, which was just honesty is paramount.
So you get out of Harvard. You go from high school to Harvard.
Yes.
And then when you got out of Harvard, when did you go into the military?
Directly out of undergrad. I was an officer candidate.
And what did your mother say?
My mother found out ex post facto. So I told my mom, between junior and senior years, when you go to officer candidate school in Quantico, mm-hmm. and that's a 3-month program. It's basically like a job interview for the Marine Corps. And I didn't really feel like having that conversation with my mom.
Yeah, that's what I'm a mom. I'm listening,
So I told her I had an internship with the Department of Defense, which was, in keeping with honesty, was not a lie, but was maybe...
the Catholic school says there are two kinds of sins. There's sins of omission and commission. And yours was more a sin of omission. You didn't fill in the whole story.
I think the Jews might use more colorful language, but my mom certainly did when she found out. But I told my dad, I didn't tell my mom. And I loved it at Quantico. I really felt like I had made the right decision and knew that I was in the right place, as hard as it was, and it was certainly challenging. And she came around and was my biggest supporter, as she always has been.
But when you get out of office, where are you deployed?
Spent another year in Quantico to learn how to be a platoon commander. So officer candidate school, that's like a job interview, but then you've got a year of actually learning how to do the job, which is after college. And then I was a platoon commander in Afghanistan for an infantry unit, and then I was a platoon commander for a reconnaissance unit in Panama.
How long did you serve? I mean, God bless you. There's nothing glamorous about that. My nephew was in Iraq, Bo Biden.
Yes.
And the military, it's not only the military, the men and women who actually are there and serving on boots on the ground, but the families. It's very tough. Now, you're a single man at this time.
I was a single man at this time. You're absolutely right that the deployments take, I would argue, maybe even a bigger toll on the spouses and the children than it does on the actual Marines deploying. I worked with non-commissioned officers and staff NCOs who had deployed 5 to 7 times. And I was there really at the surge in both Afghanistan and Iraq. And it takes a massive toll on families and on mental health. It absolutely does. But it was the second best decision I ever made. Number one, asking my wife to marry me, but number two, joining the Marine Corps. I have been proud and happy that I made that decision every day since.
How has your work, your job, your loyalty, your commitment to the Marine Corps, how has that influenced what you have done for the rest of your life, or your job now? You're as a congressman. I mean, what do you? How'd you make the switch from going there to then going into continue public service, but in a different way as an elective officer?
Certainly not a natural transition. It influences me in myriad ways. Probably the most basic is the ability to make decisions under stress. That functionally is what you learn how to do as an officer in the Marine Corps. It is a decision-making curriculum, and they create a lot of stress. They create a lot of degraded environments that you have to operate in. But ultimately, what they want to see you do is make decisions, understanding that 80% decisions are better than no decision at all. And so that has been a skill set that I've been able to carry over, because politics in a different way is stressful. But ultimately, I'm the one who has to make most of the decisions. I can take the best input I can get from staff and from others, but I've got to make the decision and feel comfortable with that. So that skill set learned early on in my career has been very helpful. It's also, on the policy side, made me more willing to push back on the Pentagon. I have voted against, for example, the Pentagon's budget, not because I don't love the uniformed services. As I said, joining the Marine Corps was one of the best decisions I ever made, because I think they're not spending money as wisely as they should be. And having been in the Marines, I think, gives me some of the confidence and credibility to say that in a way that comes from a place of real love and devotion, not from a place of just blind criticism.
And then the flip of when they come home, our veterans come home, of taking care of them
absolutely
the right way.
Absolutely.
What was your first job?
My first job was in high school. I worked most of high school, and I was an attendant at a gas station in my hometown. Okay,
now you're in Newton, Massachusetts. You come from a comfortable family, and you become a gas station attendant.
My parents emphasized the importance of work and of keeping busy, whether it's sports, school, and I wanted to have my own disposable income. I was saving up for a car, you didn't get a car when you were 16? I had 18? To pay for half of it.
Good.
So it was, and it was a job that actually granted a lot of autonomy to a teenager. So I closed down that shop in the evenings. I opened it up. I was alone most evenings. I was in charge of everything from cleaning it to counting the money in the till. And that range of responsibilities, I think it's important to give teenagers confidence that they can make decisions and they can own things.
That's pretty, again, just a little thread. I have a son, girl, boy, girl, and my son went to Georgetown University, and he pumped gas at the station at the triangle there, and I said to my husband, "We send him Georgetown. He's pumping gas," and he said, "Yeah, Mom, I want to make my own money. I want to be responsible. I want to."
There's good life lessons. Anything that's customer facing, whether it's restaurant work or gas station work, or I also bagged groceries and was a cashier at Star Market. Anything that I think is customer facing is a really important lesson for young people because it requires you to deal with other people in a format where they have more of the power, and then you've got to be in a sort of you've got to be able to handle all comers. I think that's a good lesson. So you were
training they were your training wheels to be a legislator.
That's right.
What's your first political job?
I was in scheduling in advance as an intern for Deval Patrick. I worked in field and data for Governor Baker, back when he was candidate Baker. But really, my first formative political experience was when I ran for city council in my hometown of Newton, in between my first and second year at business school.
Why did you do that? You're in business school,
I'm in business
and you're
school.
married, right?
I am dating my then
Okay,
my then
no
girlfriend.
babies are married yet.
No babies. We had a dog. And I joke with my wife, who I will tell you does not much care for politics. I joke with my wife that she knew what she was getting into because she started dating me.
No, you don't. Not until you're in it. You don't.
She would agree with you, not with me. That's a time between first and second year of business school where you can take risks. Most students go off and they intern at companies big and small. But I wanted to take a risk in a different format, and I had just worked for a gubernatorial campaign. I felt like I understood a lot of the field and data that underpins successful campaigns. I was like, I'm going to try my own hand at this. So I went out there and I challenged an incumbent in the Newton City Council, and it was just knocking doors. It was 14,000 doors knocked over the course of one long summer. And that is still the most important political experience I've ever had. Because what you realize and what the president understands, I think, viscerally, is that there is a deep reservoir of decency and common sense in the American public. And you don't see it on Twitter and you don't hear it on cable news, but when you have one-on-one conversations at the doorstep, it shines through.
Yeah, it's pretty hard when you're face-to-face to demonize the person who has a different opinion than you.
Absolutely. And voters are also, they're less impressed and they're also less appalled by politicians than you might believe just by looking at the media. Voters have a lot of just good old-fashioned common sense about things, and they can digest information and come to their own conclusions pretty reliably. Not every single time and not on every single issue, but en masse, I just always had this core conviction that the American people will generally get it right if we give them free and fair elections to get it right in.
Well, I'm all for you on that one. I agree completely. I think they got it right this time.
They got it right this time.
They sure did. One last thing. City council for how long?
5 years.
And then what triggered you to move up?
Yeah, so I was city council.
Up or out? What was it?
5 years city council. That was a part-time job. 5 years working in the private sector at the same time. So it was private sector during the day, and then I would come home and go to land use or public safety meetings for the city council. And realized over the course of those 5 years that I actually was enjoying the city council dimension more than the 9-to-5 private sector work, as much as I liked that. And Joe Kennedy left the seat open to challenge Ed Markey. My wife was pregnant at that time with our first. And I said to Michelle, this is going to be an open primary. This is going to be highly contested. I am probably not going to win, but I will regret not trying. And I do not want to have regrets later in life. And she was, as I said, not a big fan of politics, but a huge supporter of that decision.
Oh, God bless you. And I hope she keeps it. And you have a new baby, too.
Grace, 10 months. Yes,
10
we
months.
got Teddy 2 years and then Grace 10 months, both pandemic babies. And just the whole world for me.
Well, I'm not going anywhere near pandemic babies. God bless you. Thank you very much for being here. Now I have some more questions for you, though.
Okay.
I have some rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
I am ready.
What's your favorite ice cream?
Maple walnut.
Maple walnut is, okay, well, that's maple walnut. Okay. All right.
Is that not Biden approved?
No, I mean, it's just one of those, that's fancy.
It's my mom's favorite. So.
Okay. What profession other than your own would you?
This goes in keeping with being a nerd. I love insurance. I think property and casualty insurance is a fascinating industry. I would love to try my hand at an insurtech company.
I just want to, again, off this beaten track here, but you have just made nerd probably the sexiest word that men and women are going to hear. Like, if you're a nerd, a lot of people are going to want to be nerds. They're going to be with you.
A lot of our economy is run by nerds.
One word to describe you. Don't use nerd.
Curious.
Okay. Favorite TV show?
I think The Civil War by Ken Burns is the best TV ever put on.
Well, whatever he does is magnificent. Favorite music?
I like Jason Isbell.
Okay. I haven't heard that one either. Do you have a hidden talent?
I am a pretty good tennis player, and I still try to get out there and hit as much as I can. That's probably the one talent and hobby I have time for still.
Well, if it's not hidden, though. I mean, if you're a good tennis player, everybody knows it.
Fair point. Then no, I would have to admit that I think I have no hidden talents.
I think it's bringing out the nerd in everybody. That might be your hidden talent, elevating it. Okay, if you could have a superpower, what would it be?
Speak any language instantly.
Oh, gosh, that's a good one. Okay, and one last thing. Your theme song, do you have one when you're going on and off your rallies or your events? Do you have a...
It would be Hold My Hand by Hootie and the Blowfish.
Okay, all right. I got a couple of them, but...
What's yours?
Tina Turner, You're Simply the Best.
That's a great one.
Yeah, I play for my brother, but I mean, I think about myself. Thank you very much for spending time. And thank you to the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. And remember, all politics is personal.